to the Growth Whisperers, where everything we talk about is building enduring great companies. My name is Brad Giles, and as always, joined today by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. Hello, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Brad. You know, I realize I say I'm doing great every episode, and probably most days of my life. I'm doing really good. Just a little bit of a lingering cough and headache from my COVID experience a few weeks ago. I thought I had it before, although I never tested positive. Turns out I didn't actually have the legit version of COVID, although I felt like it. And I had it recently, and it's been a couple weeks, and I still got some lingering stuff going on in my head. And it's not fun, but I'm looking forward to getting past it. The truth is I'm doing great. Just my head's a little bit dragging behind me. How about yourself?
It's a common thing at the moment, isn't it? Yeah, I'm good.
It is.
I'm good. It's autumn here. Autumn is a beautiful, beautiful time of year. Everything is good. I might even go as far as great.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we like to start with a word or phrase of the day. Now, how prepared are you for this, Kev? Because we didn't mention it beforehand.
I'm always good to go, Brad. Ideas pop into my mind by the moment, and let me see, what do I have? When I think of the word of the day, I would say grounded. You know, I've had a bit of time with COVID where I had some time just where I couldn't really do much of anything except for a bunch of thinking, a little bit of Netflix and a bunch of thinking. And, you know, on my table in my place in Vancouver, I've got all these plans mapped out everywhere, and I was writing on my tablet, printed off a bunch of stuff. So got very regrounded in things. Felt like a mental reset. Thank you to some downtime. So that was me. So grounded. How about yourself?
Yeah, for me, it's gross profit margin. Perhaps a little bit different.
Very close.
A bit different from yourself. But yeah, like I've spent a lot of time lately because we're seeing prices increase across the board, and just doing analysis with leaders and teams about gross profit margin and how all the changing prices are affecting their gross profit margin and the flow-on effect, and how much to increase your prices by. So let's see you stitch together grounded and gross profit margin.
You know, if you don't manage your gross profit margin, your business is going to get grounded, and not in the way that you want. It's going to get grounded into the ground, and you won't have a business. So that's awesome. Well, let's get into, so what are we digging into today, Brad?
Yeah, today we're talking about the 5 most common questions that we get about scaling up. Scaling up, a book, a methodology. You know, that book, you had something to do with that, did you?
Yeah, I did a little bit of work on that book. Yeah, a few years ago. Yes.
Yeah. But look, it's something that we're certainly very passionate about, and we know, and we've spent a lot of time with each of us. And it's how we originally met about 10 years ago.
It is.
And yeah, it really does. It really does present a case of best practices on how to run a scaling mid-market business. And it's not perfect, but you know, there is a lot of things that we certainly align with.
Yeah, and it's a framework to simplify the chaos and give you some control of the chaos that's involved in growth. Initially based on the book called Rockefeller Habits, and when I got involved to help to create the new version of the book, we called it Scaling Up, because a lot of the methodologies are updated. But it was a great experience because I interviewed 50 CEOs around the world who had very, very successfully scaled using the Rockefeller Habits framework, and grabbed their insights about what worked and what didn't. And it went into the creation of the new book, or the updated framework called Scaling Up. So amazing methodology as a framework to give you the tools and point you in the right direction of the things to think about as you're bringing your team together to scale. So today, we're going to dig into some of the most common questions about the framework.
Yeah, we talk about this regularly, and we do get asked a similar set of questions. So we thought we'd go through those. So without further ado, shall we jump into it?
Yeah, so question number 1. And with the framework, look at the core tool is the one-page strategic plan. It's the strategic planning on the page, and that's like the baseline tool. And then there's other tools in there, some related to people and execution and cash and some strategy. But the one-page plan is really I would say, the greatest value in the system. It's a simple tool. So the question is, how long does it take to create that or draft that one-page strategic plan? And it's kind of like asking someone, how long is a piece of rope? Like, it depends. It all depends. In our experience, in 2 or 3 days, you can get a decent draft. You can get a B grade draft where it's good, because some of these things need time to sit and think and stew. So whether you spend 2 or 3 days, you can get a reasonable draft and get incredible alignment for your team. But man, to get it done, to get it complete, where you would say this is A+ quality work, let's get out the chisel and carve it into stone, like we nailed this thing. You know, Brad and I, we talked about this before, but it's a couple of years. I mean, some of these concepts, like just to get the vision parts right, you know, the purpose and the BHAG and the core values, to get it right, you got to do some iterations and get feedback and things like that. Those are 6 to 9 months to get that part right, just that part. So look, you can get a really good working draft that allows you to push ahead in the right direction, aligned as a team. But to get it really mastered, it's going to be a couple of years. That's my take on it. Brad, what would you add to that?
Of course, it's a couple of years. I wanted to just rewind a bit on something that you said then. So why one page? You said the greatest value is probably the one-page strategic plan. So why one page? Well, this actually comes back to Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric. Jack Welch had a training facility in Crotonville that he would send all of the best managers and leaders to learn from some of the best people from around the world. And managers would come away from there with these great, big, thick, comprehensive, detailed business plans. And they'd go back to their offices, wherever they were in the world, and then they would put them in a drawer and they wouldn't get used. And this became very frustrating after seeing this time and time and time again for Jack. So he said, if you can't fit it onto one page, it isn't important enough. And that really translates to my journey, because in about 1999, I started a business and I built a very comprehensive business plan, to the point where my accountant said that's the most comprehensive business plan that he'd ever seen.
Shocking, Brad, that you would do something comprehensive.
Who would have thought? and it was good. But then a couple of years later, 2001, I came across Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, and then switched it to one page. And that saw us become more effective over time. So a business plan we need to understand all of the parts that make up a business plan in a competing environment, that they've got to be important enough to put onto a page and not just filling boxes.
And it's hard to put it just on one. Sorry, I cut you off there, Brad. But it's hard just to put it on one page.
Yeah.
I mean, we have many clients come to us to help dial in and optimize their strategic planning. And normally when we ask to review, either they're doing nothing, which means they've scaled by luck, or they haven't scaled, or these plans, they just give me a headache. And when we had one recently that a client had, and they'd paid one of the local, consultancy firms to do it. I mean, theirs was a strategy of more is better. Volume is value. The more pages and the more documentation. I looked at it, it's like worse than that. In their structure, it was so complex. They were doing everything, including the kitchen sink, the bathroom tub, the toilet, the solar panels on the roof, and the hot water heater, and the damn swimming pool for good luck. Like, it had everything going in every direction. I mean, it was so complex. Even if it was brilliant, which it wasn't, even if it was, it would be way too hard to follow. Like, it'd be like having, a map with 1,000 different lines on it, confusing the heck out of you. So
Here's the thing about what you just said, and this is the biggest challenge that we overcome, or we have to overcome, and that is that plan might have worked really well in a multinational, okay? Where
not.
But it might have. But we need to so if you get someone who comes from an enormous corporate business, and that's what they're used to, and that's what success represents, even a consultant who comes in and writes you a business plan, then that's going to be their language. But for us, it's got to be simple and effective. It's got to, people don't have time to go through all this, and they don't have the resources to go to the level of understanding the nuances, to use your bloody terrible analogy of the swimming pool.
Yes.
And so it really matters that it's simple and highly effective, because people don't have time in the mid-market to go to all of these levels.
And I would say they don't have time in the big firms either. They can just get away with mediocrity and complexity in some of the big firms because there's so much, market share or demand or whatever it happens to be. They don't have to be as lean and nimble no matter what. But complexity doesn't work anywhere in my mind. But no matter what, we see it. So the idea, it's hard to get it complex. Now, what's also required to make that one-page plan work is a lot of humility on the part of the consultant, because it's the most basic, unimpressive damn thing in the world when you look at it. When you get into it, it's incredibly impactful, but the work product isn't overly exciting, sexy, or impressive. You can't do a 50-page report. All you can do is use the flip charts from the room maybe and put them in a deck, but it's so basic. And for some people, they can't, their ego can't handle doing such simplistic, basic work. So it's very insanely impactful. And that's the other part. The way we look at it is, look, there's lots of little boxes and you have to be succinct. And in my mind, a 10-year-old should be able to read the plan and understand it. Now, that's a really high bar. That means it's got to be so simple and right, which usually means, and that's why it takes time, it requires a lot of debates to really get through the views in the room and boil down to the essence. That's why it takes a couple of years. So as Brad said, one page, it's got to be simple. It's got to be really basic. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And, we're talking about mid-market companies here, but even in large companies, complexity is generally a product of people who don't know what they're doing. So they just throw everything into it, right?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes, that I don't even know if it's accurately attributed to him or not, but I'm told Mark Twain, but the research says Mark Twain, but a couple of places say maybe not. But it's, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. And that's what strategy in the one-page plan is about. It's about simplicity, but it takes a lot of work to get there over time, which is fine.
Yeah, it's not just goal setting, right? Goal setting may form a part of it, but if we said we're a $20 million business, we're going to go to 40 million in 5 years, that's just a hope. It's the planning that gives you the confidence. So let's spin into these 5 questions. The first one we kind of touched on already. The question is, how long does it take to complete the one-page strategic plan? And you said, how long is a piece of string? Well, I would respond by saying, it depends on how long you cut it. So how often does it need updating is the kind of second part to that. Well, I kind of look at this whole question as being, it's like brushing your teeth, to switch from the string analogy to a different one.
We got analogies everywhere today. That's awesome.
Brushing your teeth, it's an all the time job. Like, you don't say, I need to build a business plan and then it's done. It's not like you say, I need to brush my teeth and I'm not going to do it again. Like, you need to then do it the next day and the next day. And it's the same with the business plan. It's going to last about 90 days. That's the answer. There are some bits that will endure past that. And there are some bits that will be stress tested or talked about more deeply in 90 days time. There are some bits that will have expired because the priority that you set would have a 90-day time frame. So the answer is, it's really like an operating system as much as anything, which is it's going to continue to endure and to focus you in the right direction.
Yeah. And to boil that down, I would say, look, when you're first getting it going, you might look at a bunch of the pieces every 90 days as you're getting it sorted out. Once you've nailed it and the plan is solid, you'll update the quarterly section every 90 days, and the rest you'll reset every year. And once you get it going, it's a once a year on the big picture, quarterly update what you're going to achieve the next quarter.
Yeah. But I would probably allow a couple of days to get with the leadership team to get a first draft of the one-page strategic plan done.
Yep.
Yeah. By the time you work through all of the stuff, it's, to get that level of confidence, it's a couple of days, and then you want to update it 90 days later.
Yeah, perfect. Question 2, how would you get your team to buy into the scaling up method? Well, there's a couple of things here. First of all, it depends on you as a leader or a CEO. Some leaders come away and every couple of weeks they got the new religion of the week, and the team is new idea resistant because there's been so many new things thrown at them. So, often they think it's the flavor of the month or the idea of the week, and you got to be careful with that. But at the root of it, once you're clear the value it can add, there's a couple of things that we've seen really, really work. One is get people to read a few pages of scaling up, especially the intro section, to get a sense of
the barriers.
Overall, yes, and the overall view of the that is one thing. I would never, ever, ever get people to read the whole book. It's almost 100. It's in about 100,000 words. It's the working title when we did it was the implementation guide. It's like the detailed how-to of solving all these different problems. Getting people to read the whole thing before you're fully committed is not a good choice. So read the first couple sections up front, number 1. 2, get a coach or an advisor to come make a presentation on it, or another CEO who uses it, or another executive at a different company. We have people on our team, and Brad, you and your associate, and we've got a bunch of people on our team who do this. They go in and make a presentation about the framework, how it works and why it works. That's another way to help get people bought in if you're having some initial resistance. Sometimes people just want to do it so bad, they're thrilled to do anything. But if you have resistance, there's a couple of strategies. Brad, you also had another thought too.
Mate, just start doing it. Start doing it. So often what we see is either the leader, the CEO has read the book and got excited, and they're like, yep, I want to get this. Or they've had a friend who's been using it, or a colleague, and they're like, this is the thing that you need to do. So that's how it kind of starts. Yeah, I agree. Maybe get the leadership team to read the barriers chapter. It's like the first simple chapter. It's completely digestible, and it outlines the problems. And, really they're all going to be nodding their head saying, yeah, like that's the problems that we've got here.
Yep.
And so then that kind of sets the tone. Look, either you're going to do it yourself or you're going to use a coach. That's probably the two methods. Either way, just jump in and have a go at working together. Of course, Kevin, you and I are both, this is what we do.
Sure.
So we're going to advocate that you get a coach because it's going to be much more effective. But no matter what you do, set a date or two and just jump in and just start doing it.
Yeah, and there's different scenarios. I've got one CEO that I coach in the US, and they're well over $500 million of revenue, heading towards $1 billion, and they have an existing process. And when I started working with the CEO, we looked at the process. It's messy and clunky, but yet it is their operating system. As we got into it and we started talking more about scaling up, he really wants to do it. And we're looking for ways to make a smooth transition. So we're engineering a transition to a simpler platform than what they have now. They had one of those very complex platforms. So in his case, it'll happen over a couple of years, because at the way that they're scaling and what they're doing, it's already working. We don't want to dump the whole thing upside down. So we're engineering it. And again, we'll get there. Like everyone, he sees the value. And one of his colleagues who connected us is using scaling up, and he goes, yeah, we need something that simple. So anyway, the point of it is find a way to get going, getting people to read, learn, talk to other executives, somebody make a presentation. And at the end of the day, your circumstance will depict how you do it, but find a way to get it rolling. And with your company, decide how quick you want to get it going, whether it's a slow start or like tomorrow, let's just switch it on.
So what's the next question that we've got? Who on my team should be involved in the strategic planning meetings? Like my executive or all the managers? And am I going to upset some people? Like, this is often a bit of a question, starting and setting this up.
Number one rule, whoever you invite initially is going to be upset if you don't invite them in the future. So be very careful about the initial invites. It's easy to add people. It's almost, for some people, especially when it's new, it's almost insulting or demoralizing for some people to be uninvited. So the main thing is take some time on this, and better to start smaller if you need to, if that suits your circumstance.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Australian cricket team. It's very easy to get on, but very hard to get off.
I have no idea what that means, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, it's a sports team analogy that some teams, they have a culture whereby it's about kinship and mateship. And
got it.
Yeah. So in a leadership,
it's like a family. It's very hard to vote people out of the family.
Oh yeah.
And strat planning is like that. And because it's seen as being, the power center and the decision-making center, not being a part of it, I've seen some messes from that. So that's just the kind of the, hey, be careful here. But there's two different perspectives on this. One, if we really need to hammer out and debate the strategy and make some big decisions, I prefer just the executive team and smaller, which is like 6 people. But the other version is if you're more concerned with alignment, team building, DNA transfer, and involving the people who are going to do the work, it's often the executive and what we call the leadership, or the executive's direct reports, or most of them, not all of them. So that takes it to the 12 to 15 to 18 people. Yeah. Very different meetings. When you just have those 5 or 6 execs, it's more strategic meeting. When you get up to the 12 to 18, it's more of an alignment meeting. Both work depending on your circumstance. And we do both all the time.
It's hard to be prescriptive for every situation. I would say once you get over about 9 or 10 people, it kind of turns into a speaking gig rather than a facilitated strategic planning meeting. I would use slightly different language in that I would say the leadership team and then the mid-management team. But again, it's just
it depends on the size of the company.
It totally does.
If you're an 800-person company, you're not even touching a mid-manager with 18 people.
Not at all.
So for a smaller company, that would be relevant for sure.
Yeah.
So, and Brad, I would make the distinction strategy versus alignment, because we do strat planning meetings with like 20 people, breakout groups, people working on questions and sorting stuff out, like very interactive. And I know you do too. It's just, it only really works for input to strategic, but you can't make the decisions with that many people. But input and thought gathering, flowing up, or tactical decisions is what I find. The key is you got to figure out, what do you need to achieve? Is it more important that you get a few people to quickly figure out strategic things? Smaller group. If it's more important, that you get more alignment and get a wider group involved for their alignment and growth, bigger group. Now, we have some companies where we do both. we'll do some pure strategic work with my clients that was in India in Feb. Myself and the three brothers, the directors that run it, the four of us met for a day in advance and did a whole bunch of the strategic stuff. And then we come to the team for 2 days, and then we share the strategic work, get feedback and get it pressure tested, and then do the annual and quarterly execution work with them. And it works. And I've got a few clients where we do that. It works as they get bigger. That works very, very well.
And I guess to close out that question, the only other point I'd make is if you're building a leadership team to begin this process, you want to get a diversity of voices from all of the business. If your background as the leader is sales, maybe you're more aligned with the salespeople, but you want to have people from sales and operations and maybe marketing. Like you want to have the heads there, but also you want to know that you're getting in all of the corners of the business, for want of a better term. So next we've got number 4. What's the number one thing that blocks companies from scaling up?
I love what's the number one thing questions. It's kind of like Family Feud and what do people think? Have you ever seen that Family Feud show? We know, like most things, the answer is it depends.
It depends.
We can tell you common things that we see, like very common, but every company, it's different. I've been into companies where cash is the issue. I've been in companies where legacy products and old business models are holding them back. Sometimes they haven't found the honey hole of demand. It's a sales and marketing problem or positioning problem or business model. You and I talk all the time in this podcast about the quality of the team.
Yeah. Sometimes
it's the damn CEO. Sometimes the CEO is in the way of the business, or the founder, if they're still, it's a little bit of everything. And, it's a little bit of everything, but normally the common denominator is discipline around core areas.
Yeah.
It's normally a discipline. We just don't know where.
Yeah. So scaling up is founded on these 4 principles of you've got to have the right people, the right strategy, you've got to execute correctly, and you've got to have the cash or the business model right, that element. So the answer to that question, what's the number one thing, is probably within one of those 4 areas. And it's probably going to be, it's probably going to be an issue that is there before you start, if that makes sense. And then how do you solve that? Because if your business model isn't perfect, it's going not perfect, but if your business model isn't effective, it's going to translate. So it comes down to one of those. So the next question that we've got is, do I need a coach to implement scaling up?
And we're biased. It's interesting. I'm going out on Thursday to learn how to drive my new race car. I got a new race car last season, never fully mastered the car. And of course, my buddies will gladly help me because some of my buddies have the same race car and they've been doing it for longer. But I hired one of the top racers I know, a young kid who races around the world. I got him coming out. I'm going to warm up in the morning, get back into the car and get sorted. And I've got him coming in the afternoon because I want to learn how to master this damn thing. And I'm going to hire a master to learn how to master it. And some people, by the way, it's because I believe in shortcuts, smart shortcuts. Some people would do it all themselves and take 6 months and do it on their own. Hey, whatever floats your boat. But this is business and time is money. And money is about, getting a return on your investment. So look, you can do anything yourself. It's just, my default is I just had another consultant up with me last Friday I was telling you about to give me some guidance on scaling our firm. Why? Because that's what he's done for 30 years in his life. And I sought out someone who was an expert. So you and I are both people who default to experts. So that's our view. Brad, obviously we're both quite biased. What else? What would you add to that?
Well, no athlete ever achieved peak performance without a coach.
Yes.
you know, I mean, if, I don't know, you, like me, have probably built more than 1,000 business plans. Okay.
Yes.
The iterations that we have seen, the different nuances, how it all plugs together, it's simply second nature to us. And as many other coaches who are proficient in the space. So yeah, I think that, you can definitely do it yourself. There's no doubt about it. And you can have amazing results. But if you're in a scaling mid-market firm, you need to get the best results that you can. And if you've got someone who's highly proficient in an area, that can pay massive dividends.
It can. And if you look at the value that the external person, it's actually, believe it or not, I was saying to a CEO the other day, when we're doing strat planning, the value that myself, you, and our teams bring to this, one is facilitation around the framework to help the team align and make decisions. Structuring, running, and facilitating that meeting itself is a skill, and I think it's worth the fee that we charge, because that is a very hard thing to have somebody do. And that way one of your team doesn't have to play facilitator, they can be team member and thinker. The second is the wisdom that we bring from all the other companies that we work with.
Yeah.
So there's two different angles. And for both of those reasons, for a lot of people, they continue to have somebody do it. Now, the wisdom is always helpful. It might be more helpful initially. But the facilitation, it's just damn hard to run these meetings. We have one of our clients who worked with us for quite a few years and is wildly successful. And I chatted with them this week. They needed some help again because they decided to take the meetings internally and run them internally. And over the last couple of years, it didn't work. They hired someone to handle it. They tried, and the discipline faded away, which is not uncommon. So yes, you can. And there's great benefits to having someone else. First of all, the meetings happen and you accomplish most of what you intended to.
Okay. Last question, which of the 10 Rockefeller habits do you think is the most important? Well, I'm going to start off there. I'm not even going to give you a chance because I reckon it's number one. The executive team is healthy and aligned, right? If you don't have a healthy executive team, like you look at all of the other 9 things in the Rockefeller Habits checklist, it's going to be problematic. So I'd say most important thing, a strong, cohesive executive team, and then everything else can begin to occur after that.
Yeah, and I would say, first of all, for those of you that aren't familiar, Rockefeller Habits is a set of 10 habits in the book Scaling Up. Originated in the book Rockefeller Habits, although we updated them when we did Scaling Up. And the first one's about the team. Second one's around having clear aligned goals. The third one's around meetings. The fourth one's around accountability. Then we get into customer feedback, employee feedback, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to agree with you. And I'm going to also add number 2. And when we start with companies, I look in 2 places: aligned, tight team, and clear goals that everyone is marching towards. And if we've got really clear goals and a tight team, that's a foundation we can roll with. And if we don't get those 2 in place, I know that we're going to slip on a lot of critical stuff. Now, as always, the answer is it depends. It depends on your company and your circumstance. But as those 2 are critical in the long run, once you get the goals going, which we normally do in our first few sessions, that team piece becomes more valuable because the goals become like a basic. Of course you have goals and you're aligned, but getting that team strong becomes a massive focus.
The most important thing, like, yeah. And it just, when you worked with a team for a year or 2, you begin to see just how important the strength of that alignment within that leadership team becomes, because all of the other bits can be undermined if that isn't there. And it becomes incredibly frustrating when we're trying to do a lot of other things. So yeah, I mean,
yeah,
similar, same
we're
answer.
agreeing.
We're agreeing.
I had a meeting last week with a company for 2 days. They've been around about 60 years. We started applying scaling up to it about 2 years ago. In that time frame already, the business has pretty well doubled. A 60-year-old business. The strength of the team is changed dramatically. We had a session where one of the key leaders in the room is no longer with us, but two of that person's juniors were in the room. They kind of got promoted. You could feel the energy and the harmony of the team. The quality of the discussions and debates was the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
But we've been running these quarterly meetings, and it was so obvious that one of the people was not like the others, and there needed to be a change. We saw the change. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And we identified it as one of the biggest obstacles to our growth. We knew it was going to be an issue if we didn't fix that team issue. And even in it, we were doing a talent review. We spent 2.5 hours debating the talent review of all the other key people in the business and just the quality of the team. It was absolutely awesome. All right, well, let's review here. So we're talking about, questions about scaling up. Great methodology. We both believe in it. We both have iterated and add other tools and other things to enhance it based on what our clients need. But the first question, how long does it take to complete the one-page strat plan? The answer is you can get a good B quality draft in a couple of days, 2-3 days, and then you're going to chip away at it and iterate it for a year or two before you could say it's, like a piece of work. Second question, how do you get your team to buy into the methodology? Well, it depends, but getting them to read the first couple sections of scaling up, or maybe you have a coach come in and make a presentation and have a discussion around it and how they would see it get valuable. Or, as Brad talked about, sometimes you just got to get started. And as I shared, sometimes you got to engineer a plan to make a transition to a better platform like this over a year or two, depending on your situation. Brad, you want to do the rest there?
Who in my team should be involved in the strat planning? Well, it depends. Ideally, 6 to 8 executives. We want some diversity in the business, but it really depends on your situation. But we want leaders who are going to make decisions, and we don't want any people who are passengers. Number 4, what's the number one thing that blocks companies from scaling up? It depends, but we look to people, strategy, execution, cash. We've got to get those things right. Whichever of those is the least right, or the ones that are not performing well, that's what's going to hold you back and the problem that's got to be solved. Do I need a coach to implement scaling up? Look, I hate to say it again, but it depends. You can do it yourself for sure. If you want an accelerated journey, if you want to really invest to get the best results, obviously coaches will create better results. And then finally, which of the 10 Rockefeller habits do you think is the most important? My contention is number 1, the executive team is healthy and aligned. Kevin's is 1, maybe +2. What a good chat we've had today. Enjoy the question format, bit of a change. Yeah,
it is. I really liked it too. Some good thinking on, especially on a framework that we're big advocates of. So, hey, thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast with Brad Giles and Kevin Lawrence. If you want to get more, we've got both have excellent newsletters, and and we're here to support and help your scale. Brad, you can get his newsletter and go to his site, evolutionpartners.com.au, and for myself, lawrenceandco.com. Hope you have an awesome week and continue to scale and grow. See you soon.